So, here's where we are right now. IShowSpeed just finished a 121-hour Minecraft marathon with Kai Cenat. All 4 bosses, 1 hardcore world, 42 deaths before they got it done. A month before that, he stood on the stage at the FIFA World Cup final and performed his song Champions in front of the stadium. The first content creator to ever do that. He hit 60 million YouTube subscribers by literally strapping himself to a chair with helium balloons and trying to fly and then falling when they burst. He's been on every continent. He pulled over 1 million people live from Indonesia. At the same time, on one stream, he celebrated his 21st birthday in Lagos and hit 50 million subs in the middle of a street with a birthday cake. This is the biggest streamer alive right now. And years ago, when Speed was pulling roughly 1,000 viewers, one person looked at him and said, "This kid is going to be the next big thing." That person was Adin Ross. And he was right. Now, the way this story normally gets told, Adin gets the credit secondhand. There's a clip that went around from a KSI and Logan Paul podcast where Mike Majlak basically confirmed it. He said Adin told him when Speed was 16 that this kid was going to be the next big thing, that he wanted him to move into the house, and Majlak admitted he gave Adin a hard time about it because Speed was so young. That story surfaced in 2023, and a lot of people ran with it. But here's the thing, we don't need Majlak's version, because Adin told it himself.
This guy named Speed, he's from the 2K community. I was in his stream earlier. I always show love to people. Like, that's one thing about me that, like, other people just have a hard time doing. Like, I don't know who else is really big and came out of the 2K community.
1,000 viewers. That's what Speed was doing when Adin made that video. 1,000 people. For context, that's a decent stream for someone still grinding their way up. It is not a number that makes you call someone the future of streaming, but Adin did it anyway. He made a video. He talked about this kid named Speed from the 2K community, and Speed kept it. That's the receipt. That's the whole thing. He didn't just say it in private to Majlak. He put it on camera when nobody was watching, when it would have been extremely easy to just say nothing, and Speed kept that video like a piece of evidence he was going to need someday. And I think people forget what Speed actually was in 2021. Or they never knew to begin with, because they only found him after he was already everywhere. Speed came up through the NBA 2K community. That's where he started. A young kid streaming 2K, getting into it on camera, building a small but loyal audience that liked his energy. And his energy was a lot. He was loud, he was unpredictable, he made people laugh at things they probably shouldn't have, and the content was chaotic in a way that felt like it could either blow up or implode at any second, which honestly was part of the appeal. But to most people who encountered him in that window, he was a meme, an entertaining one, sure. Someone worth clipping, but not someone you looked at and said, this kid is going to perform at a World Cup.
And at first, like, Rice, I don't want this kid here. He might be fucking weird. I don't know who. He just screams and barks. I'm very scared.
And I love that clip because it's honest. Adin wasn't some genius who saw a finished product and recognized it immediately. He was skeptical. He thought Speed might be weird. He didn't know what he was looking at, but something in it made him keep watching, keep paying attention, and eventually make a video about this kid anyway, even when his first instinct was, I don't want this guy around. That's a harder call than if he'd been immediately certain. The uncertainty makes it a real prediction, not a coin flip. So how did they actually get in the same room? Ricegum connected them. Adin's network at the time ran through the house, through the content creator world that was building around him, and Ricegum was part of that. Speed ended up coming to LA, and from what Adin described, it was not a guaranteed thing. Speed had to fight to make it happen. His mom said no. Speed begged, and eventually he came out to LA, walked in on camera for the first time, and they put it on stream. And if you go back and watch those early streams, the chemistry was immediate. The chaos was immediate. Speed was exactly as unhinged in person as he was online, and Adin leaned into it because that's what Adin's whole thing has always been, finding people who bring something different and putting them in front of his audience. Because here's the thing about Adin Ross that I think gets undersold when people talk about him. His whole identity as a streamer has always been the cosign, the connection, the ability to pull someone from one world into another. He brought rappers into streaming before it was obvious. Soulja Boy, Lil TJ, Tory Lanez, Lil Uzi, 21 Savage. He moved between worlds easily, and he built a reputation for being the person who saw what was coming next. Speed was the streaming version of that same instinct. Now I want to be clear about something because I think this distinction actually matters for the story. Adin didn't make IShowSpeed. Speed built his own channel. He grinded the 2K community, he built his own audience, he had his own momentum before Adin ever entered the picture. The call Adin made wasn't, I'm going to create this person. It was, I see what this person is going to become. that's a different thing. And honestly, it's the harder thing because it requires reading someone's potential rather than manufacturing it. But Adin wasn't just a passive observer either. He had Speed's back in a real way early on. There's a clip of Adin defending Speed from a racist on OMTV, just putting himself between Speed and someone who was being terrible to him in the middle of a stream without making it a big moment. Just had his back. And that's not a calculated PR move. That's just loyalty from before there was any reason to be loyal when Speed was still a kid nobody had heard of. The last time they streamed together before things went quiet was January 2022, Speed's birthday. And even then, in that window when they were both still building, you could feel that these two were going to be something significant together. So let's actually talk about what Adin's call became, because you can say someone's going to be big and then they get reasonably big and the call is fine. That's not what happened here. September 2024. Speed is on tour in Southeast Asia. He's in Indonesia streaming IRL, and his concurrent viewer count hits 1,043,000 people at the same time on a single live stream, which remains his personal record to this day. He broke down on stream when it happened. You could see it in him. The weight of that number, the scale of what was actually being built. 1 million people watching one person walk around Indonesia. January 21st, 2026. Speed turns 21. He's in Lagos, Nigeria in the middle of his Speed Does Africa tour, 28 days, 20 countries. He hits 50 million YouTube subscribers live on stream, burying his face in a birthday cake in the middle of Lekki, while the crowd loses their minds around him. Rolling Stone had named him the most influential creator of 2025, then July 2026. FIFA asks him to perform at the World Cup final, in front of the stadium and a global audience. The first content creator to ever stand on that stage. His World Cup Champions track had already crossed 90 million views in its first month. One of the biggest football songs of the entire tournament, and then 10 days before this video, August 7th through the 12th, Speed and Kai, Minecraft Hardcore, all 4 bosses, Ender Dragon, Wither, Elder Guardian, Warden, One World, no respawns, 121 hours, 42 deaths before they got it done, over 30 million hours watched across both channels. This was 2 weeks ago. Now I want to put that Minecraft number in context for a second, because 30 million hours watched is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. That's not views, that's time hours of actual human attention accumulated across both channels in 5 days. The 2024 run with Kai, which at the time broke records and ran on every streaming news site, did 18.8 million hours watched, and that was already considered one of the biggest streaming events of the year. The 2026 run nearly doubled it, and this one had a harder objective, 4 bosses, not 1 dragon, which means the viewer count didn't just hold over 121 hours, it sustained. People stayed. That's what Speed does. He makes people stay. And that's not separate from what Adin called. That's exactly what Adin called. The chaos travels, and people can't look away from it, and they stay. 1,000 viewers in 2021. 30 million hours of watch time in 2026. That's the distance between the prediction and the result. And that last part is what I keep coming back to. Adin has said that Cristiano Ronaldo became more of a viral sensation in America because of Speed. That Speed did that. That this kid from the 2K community, who was pulling 1,000 viewers when Adin made that video, ended up moving the needle on how one of the most famous athletes in human history was perceived in an entire country. I don't know if that's literally true, but I know it's not insane to say it, and the fact that it's not insane to say it tells you everything about how right Adin was, and Adin knows it. He knows exactly how right he was.
Miss him a lot, man. I miss him a lot. I'm not gonna come down. He's the hottest ever been.
There's something interesting about how Adin talks about Speed now, because it isn't the energy of someone who wants credit for it. It doesn't sound like, I told you so. It sounds like someone watching something they loved grow into something they couldn't fully have predicted and feeling genuinely proud of it from a distance. He's called Speed a pioneer. He's said Speed made soccer popular in America. He said Speed is, as far as numbers go, the biggest streamer of all time. And those aren't throwaway compliments from a guy looking to stay relevant. That's Adin, who has been around long enough to know what numbers mean, just saying plainly what he sees. The call aged perfectly. But here's the part that makes this story something other than a clean victory lap. The guy who called it isn't really in the picture anymore. Speed played in the 2025 Sidemen charity match. Adin didn't, he wasn't invited, and he ended up announcing his own charity game instead. It wasn't a great moment for him. The trio that used to feel like a genuine 3-way friendship, Adin, Speed, Kai, has been quiet for a while now. The joint streams dried up. The dynamic shifted. And there's no one dramatic falling out to point to, no single moment where it broke, it just kind of drifted.
I miss those days, man. 2021, Aiden the Speed shit was fun. Sometimes it's fun to reminisce.
And I think about that clip a lot. Because Adin isn't bitter about it. He's not angry. He sounds like someone who is genuinely proud of what Speed became and genuinely wistful about the version of things where they got to experience it together. The guy who called it before anyone else. When Speed was pulling 1,000 viewers, when the 2K community was where Speed lived, when the call looked like a reach. That guy is watching from the outside now. And he still sounds like he loves him. That's not nothing. That's actually the realest part of this whole story. So what did Adin actually get right? And I don't mean he predicted Speed would be big because that's underselling it. Lots of people thought Speed was entertaining. Plenty of people thought he'd build a solid audience. What Adin saw, specifically, was that Speed's particular flavor of chaos was going to travel. That the energy was universal in a way that most streaming content isn't. That you didn't need to know what NBA 2K was or understand any specific reference to feel what Speed was doing on camera. You just had to be a human being capable of emotion, and Speed was going to drag you into it with him. That turned out to be a call that aged into something almost ridiculous in how precisely it hit. 1 million people in Indonesia, a birthday cake in Lagos, a closing ceremony at the World Cup. Because the chaos traveled. It traveled everywhere. And Adin saw it in a 1,000-viewer 2K stream and said, this kid. The people who didn't take that seriously at the time weren't wrong to be skeptical. The call was a reach. That's what makes it a real prediction. If it was obvious it wasn't a call, it was just observation. Adin made a call. And it landed about as clean as any call has ever landed in streaming history. And I think that's the version of this story that gives both of them their due. Adin saw it, Adin backed it. And then Speed went and did everything that nobody, including probably Adin, fully saw coming in terms of the actual scale. Performing at World Cups, getting Ghanaian citizenship, having 1 million people in Indonesia watch him just walk around. The call was right. The outcome exceeded the call by a distance that makes the call look small in comparison, which is maybe the highest compliment you can give it. I'll say this, in 5 years, when people look back at the early days of what Speed built, Adin Ross's name should be in that conversation. Not as the person who made Speed, Speed made Speed, but as the person who looked at a 1,000-viewer stream and said out loud, on camera, that this was going to be something. Before it was safe to say, before anyone was going to agree with you, before there was any real evidence, that's what a real call looks like. It feels wrong at the time, it gets ignored, and then the receipts come in one at a time until there's nothing left to argue about. Adin was right about IShowSpeed, and it turns out he always knew it. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Drop it in the comments. Do you think Adin and Speed ever actually get back to what they were, or has Speed outgrown that version of things in a way that makes it impossible to go back? Because I don't think there's a clean answer. And I think that's the most interesting part of this whole story. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like, subscribe, comment, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.